I'll start from a quote from the Kabbalion, which is a 2,500-year-old Egyptian philosophy. Many people think it's the beginning of occult teachings. And from the philosophy is called Hermetics. And one of the main books on Hermetics is called the Kabbalion. Here's a quote from it. Mental power is the greatest natural force. This revolutionizes life for those who understand. The Kabbalion. Basically in Hermetics, they talk about how the mind is all. The mind is all. Like consciousness, like God mind is everything. Consciousness is everything. Consciousness creates matter. So it all begins with consciousness, God consciousness. And as people, we have consciousness as well. And the way Hermetics frames it is if we can get our vibration to move towards God consciousness vibration, we have much more clarity, obviously much more. We feel better, and we're just vastly more powerful. So I do believe that the human mind is very powerful. Indeed, only we don't understand that. But perhaps it's part of human evolution to learn how powerful the mind is, and for us to begin to work with the mind to achieve our natural innate abilities to and who knows what those are. We don't even know, really. But so the beginning is what is the mind? What is the mind? It's like, it's easy to talk about, well, what is it, And I like using this. This is supposed to be a lake. So it's a lake model of the mind. And the surface of the lake, just the surface, is the conscious mind. Conscious mind. The conscious mind is our experience in the present moment. What life is like for us right in the moment. That's our conscious mind. And then below the conscious mind is a subconscious mind. And I've divided up the subconscious into 4 sections, and they kind of blend into each other somewhat, but there's cognitive memory, our memories of the past or theories or ideas. Our interest library. It's like we have a shelf of books, like with our interests. What are we interested in? Our belief garden, which is really important. And our procedural memory, or our muscle memory. Let me talk about the subconscious. In driving a car, let's say we're driving a car. Essentially, it's the subconscious mind that is doing the driving. Consciously, our conscious mind can be focused on anything. We could be singing a song, we could be thinking about the past, we could be making plans for dinner or whatever. The subconscious mind is driving the car, basically. So the subconscious mind is super important when it comes to our thoughts, our behaviors, how we're feeling. And for me, the question is, how do we get into that subconscious mind and begin to hone it, begin to reprogram it, begin to notice what is working for us and what's not working for us. Maybe we could, I want to work in some mindfulness skills, some transmutation skills. That's what the Kabbalion calls these skills. And basically, Transmutation means to be able to take something that's lower and make it higher, make it elevated. And one way of thinking of the mind is there's two basic states of mind. There's an elevated level of mind and a lower level of mind. In the elevated level, elevated. The elevated level of mind is when you're feeling inspired. This is on your sheet, so you can just look at it later or whatever. I don't know if you can see it. But the elevated mind is when you're feeling inspired, when you're feeling alive, when you're feeling content, when you're basically feeling good, And then the lower state of mind is when you're feeling anxious or when you're feeling depressed, when you're feeling angry, perhaps, guilty. You get the idea. There's two basic states of mind. And transmutation is having the ability to notice when you're in the lower state of mind and to transmutate up to the elevated state of mind. So we'll be working on some of those skills tonight. Another word for transmutation in modern psychology could be emotional regulation skills. That's what they'll call it. So you don't get stuck in a lower emotion. You're able to regulate your emotions, emotional regulation. Only transmutation is kind of emotional regulation on steroids. So we could begin by working on one transmutation skill, or whatever you'd want to call it, a mindfulness skill perhaps. I'll talk about, just before we practice something, I want to just mention this one term, metacognition. Metacognition. It's an important term. It means cognition of cognition, which means I'm watching my thoughts. I'm noticing my thoughts. And ideally, we want to have mindful metacognition. So I watch my thoughts, like my mind's chattering away, right? I'm the witness to that if I'm using metacognition. So I'm noticing these thoughts. My mind's chattering. And that is step one in taking control of the thoughts, right? Because if we don't even notice the thoughts, the tendency in our culture is, guess what? Our minds just chatter away and we self-identify with the thoughts. That's me. Those thoughts are me. Blah, blah, blah. That's that chattering mind. Blah, blah. It's like once we begin to learn metacognition, we learn, no, I am not my thoughts. And that's empowering. When we realize that's not me. These are just old, a lot of these thoughts, a lot of my mind chattering is just old habits, old patterns of thinking, coming from my beliefs and my interests and my memories. Well, once I notice that, and I become skillful at mindful metacognition, and I should mention that metacognition can be seen as just the king and queen of all mindfulness practices, because it's something you take with you everywhere. You can notice your thinking just throughout the day. Notice your thoughts. Because the idea is, if we're not in charge of our thoughts, guess what? Our thoughts are in charge of us. So either our old habits are going to run us, or I'm going to watch these thoughts, and when the thoughts are unproductive, perhaps, like negative self-talk. I'd consider that unproductive. I notice it, label it, metacognition, label it. Oh, that's that old unproductive negative self-talk thing. And I'm like, bam, I quiet it down. And at that point, I am in charge of my thoughts rather than my thoughts being in charge of me. And at that point, I am empowered. And as far as psychology goes, that feeling of empowerment is really key to mental wellness, or one of the keys, for sure. It's feeling empowered. And it all begins with it can start with metacognition, that process of empowerment. Noticing mindfully, labeling it, and that old unproductive thought, and then I'm either going to reboot it, shut it up, or I'm going to re-steer it. That's another technique, re-steer it. But either way, I'm not allowing that old pattern to run my life, unless I notice it and I just want to let it go, let it happen. But at least it's up to me at that point. But the more we practice metacognition, and metacognition is something you take with you wherever you go, the more you notice it, the more you work with it, the more empowered you become, because you become more skillful. And you become more familiar with these old, because you'll notice, at least I've noticed, that a lot of like the negative self-talk stuff, it's all the same. It just keeps repeating. It's like I make a certain kind, whatever, it just like blooms in my mind or whatever. And it's like, so you get to be familiar with your thoughts, and you get to be familiar with the thoughts that you don't want to have anymore, So then you start working on reducing those habits, because this is all just habitual. And if we don't take on these habitual patterns, they just keep going and going and going and going and going. I mean, how many people can like hold a grudge for their entire life because it's like this habitual thing and blah blah blah, But we don't need to do that. We can take charge of what's going on. And for us to be effective at working with our mind, we need to be able to get into this subconscious and start reprogramming this stuff too. Metacognition is kind of like we're working with the conscious mind, right? Because we're consciously noticing this is happening right now. Boom, boom, working with it. Another thing we want to be aware of with our metacognition is just simply rumination, overthinking. I mean, it's really an epidemic in our culture, for sure. Just we're in this culture where most of us spend a lot of time, looking at phones and watching screens, and the way the mind reacts to that is the mind, it ingests the information. It's part of your mental diet. If I'm looking at something and I'm reading it, I'm engaging with it, it's going into my mind, it's part of my mental diet, and then I shut the phone, and then my mind is processing that information, right? So it just doesn't go away like that. And the more of a emotional charge it has, that information can just stay with you for a long time, So a lot of our minds, including myself, a lot of the time, I'm just ingesting information, processing, ingesting, processing, ingesting, processing, ingesting, processing. Like I get into that pattern, and in doing so, there's no time for peace. There's no space. There's no quiet in my conscious mind, right? My conscious mind is just constantly working, processing, analyzing, looking at this new data. How could they say that? Whatever. And just, but in reality, in our conscious minds, for us to feel balanced and clear-minded, we need space between our thoughts. We need space. We need quiet between the analysis, moments of analysis. And you can use metacognition to notice, oh, I'm thinking too much. I'm thinking, for me, I can get all wound up if I feel like I've been dissed or blah, 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 blah. And then I start ruminating on it. So my mind is blah, blah, blah. But I'll notice it and I'll be like, I think I've thought about that enough. You know what I mean? I've thought about that enough. And then in my mind, I'll just be like, transmutate. Seriously. And then, so I'll get into the first transmutation skill. And that's simply just breathing in and feeling your ribs expanding underneath your armpits. And just exhaling and slowing the exhale. And just, I call it conscious breathing or optimal breathing. You're really using your lungs to the way they're supposed to be used, essentially. I've heard Eckhart Tolle talking about how shallow breathing is an epidemic in our culture. And I believe it, because we're so in our heads. We have so much information. Whoa, what's going on? We lose touch with our body, and then we're breathing shallowly. And then guess what? We're breathing shallowly. We're not getting enough oxygen per breath. So then the heart's got to beat a little faster, because there's not as much blood, not enough oxygen, Heart beats faster and we start getting just wound up, agitated, anxiety. But through the optimal breathing, we can positively affect our state of consciousness and our physiological state as well. We can relax and be more aware. And as I'd mentioned, in the conscious mind, find those moments of peace throughout the day. Because if we don't have those moments of peace, the mind gets agitated, the mind is overwhelmed. Because our minds are not designed to be computers. We're not just supposed to be running data. It's like, that doesn't work. Just think of it, our ancestors. What were we doing, for the past 100,000 years? We're walking through the woods. We're looking for, we're quiet. Our minds are quiet. Our minds are awake. And we've kind of lost that in this modern culture. And we're exploited because of it, And we're just not happy because of it. Sometimes we're happy, but we could be happier. I'll say that. But one of the keys is to finding moments of peace. Moments of peace throughout the day, moments of quiet in your mind throughout the day. And just noticing, using metacognition, noticing, oh, I'm thinking too much. I'm thinking too much. Come back and just take a deep breath. Really feel those ribs and just, you can do that with me right now if you want. Just breathing in and feeling the ribs expanding underneath your armpits. And then exhaling and lengthening the exhale, getting rid of the CO2. Because think of that, if we're engaged in shallow breathing, guess what? We have this CO2 that's stuck in our lungs. Isn't that the stuff that comes out of the back of cars? CO2? We want to get rid of it. Yeah. So, that's the conscious mind. What about the subconscious? Now, It's interesting. How do we get in there? How do we get into the subconscious and rework things a bit? And an easy practice that I use every day that helps me to get into my belief garden. And I every day I work on expanding the plot of gratitude in my belief garden. Every day. And it's easy, it's simple. And the quickest way there for me is to just repeat the phrase thank you in my mind. Thank you. And I do this, I try and hit it first thing in the morning before I even get out of bed. I should mention that this dotted line right here, it's that spot where we're half awake, half asleep, right? Because consciously we're awake. When we're asleep, we're in the subconscious, we're dreaming. And this dot is like, well, it's the divider between the two. It's that place where you wake up and you're still half sleeping and you remember a dream. And you're like, oh, that was cool. That was cool. And then half an hour later, you can't remember it at all. It's like, what was that? I don't know. And the reason you remembered it is because you're like, it's fuzzy, man. You're half in consciousness, half in the subconscious. So I think that's a special time of the day for us. And when I'm engaged with that time, that's ideally the time I want to begin to say thank yous in my mind. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. And just through repetition, through repeating something over and over, that's how it begins to sink into the subconscious. And that's how it starts getting into the belief garden. It's just through repetition. Thank you, thank you. And this time in the morning is a very effective time to do that, but any time is an effective time to do it. And you don't need any specific thing to be thankful for either when you're using the thank you practice. The idea is you start saying thank you, so you're taking control of this. You're saying thank you, you know. So you're in charge at that point of your internal dialogue. You're in charge. You're empowered. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And what I've noticed for myself is when I start saying that, I'm directing my mind to seek reasons to fulfill the statement. Such as unless I'm walking to the bathroom in the morning, I'm like, thank you, I'm half asleep. And then I'm like, oh, I have a roof over my head. Awesome, Wow, I got running water. How cool is that? It's, at that time I was in the dentist chair getting my tooth drilled, and I'm like, I'm not going to say thank yous. This is a drag, Then I was like, about halfway through, I really wasn't going to do it either. Halfway through, I was like, I'll try it, for an experiment. Might as well. So I said, thank you. And it took, I'm not exaggerating, probably 2 seconds, maybe in under 2 seconds, my suffering went from like an 8 to a 4. Because I just became really grateful that I was able to have this procedure done. I'm getting it fixed. That's great. I was like, whoa. And then, so my suffering just shifted through consciously taking control of the dialogue and saying thank yous. And in doing so, every day, I am consciously working on growing that plot of gratitude in my belief garden. And according to, just a lot of different sources, they say, you want to be a good manifester, just be more grateful. So I'm like, yeah, I'm down with that. I want to be able to manifest stuff. So that's one way of getting into the belief garden, is just saying thank you whenever. I've used it interpersonally too. I was with my eldest daughter And we were driving, and we were getting in some argument, debate thing, which, you know, we have done in the past. And I don't even know what it was about, but in my mind, I was like, wait, this is enough. I don't want to do this anymore. And I started saying thank you in my mind. And then I just became, again, I was directing my mind. And then my mind was like, oh, you're with your daughter. Isn't that cool? Be grateful for that. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's right. But, you know, it's easy to just get carried away by negative energy. And I don't know, the thank you is a great way to be empowered over that. And with my clients, I suggest they try and say at least 100 thank yous a day, you know. And I don't know how many I say, but I try and say some every day for sure. But that's one way of getting into the subconscious, through just repetition. And that's how it's used against us too, like in advertising, you know, they'll just repeat a message over and over, or the news will repeat something over and over and over and over and over, you know, the whole thing, until it just starts sinking into people's belief gardens, right? Same thing. Only we can use it to our advantage. You know, let's use it to become more empowered, to become more compassionate, become more, just better manifestors in general. Interest library, that's another thing we can really work with as far as our subconscious mind. What I've been doing, I'm trying to, for example, I'm paying more attention to, you know, Hermetics and Stoicism and Buddhism and manifesting and gratitude. All these, like, those are all on books in my interest library on my shelf. There's only so much space, you know, and I'm getting rid of books on like politics, you know, getting rid of just the news. I don't need that, you know, just that kind of stuff. So I'm like working with my interest library, working with my subconscious mind. Procedural memory or muscle memory. That's the thing, we were talking about driving the car. You know, the muscles know what to do. Or even just walking. I mean, I don't have to think, raise my leg, bring the left foot forward, you know, set it down, raise this leg. It's like, no, it's in my muscle memory. It's in my procedural memory, just like. So by learning new habits, new ways of, you know, new movements perhaps, you're getting in there. I see Tai Chi as a way of getting into that procedural memory. And ideally, what we want to do is we want to develop the habit of the procedure that I'm trying to develop is when I'm feeling stressed out. I'm trying to go into this optimal breathing and transmutation. You know, and that's a Stoic philosophy which really resonates with me, and it's seeing challenges as opportunities. So you flip it in your mind, you know. Any challenge, I mean, and the thing is, that is part of the human condition, is challenges. Or our challenges. They don't stop, you know. It's like, oh man, if I just had $1 million, I wouldn't have any more challenges. It's like, no, yeah, you would, you know. Because they just keep coming. They just keep coming at you. And the deal is, how do we deal with them? You know, but in Stoicism, they say, see it as an opportunity. So that's the way I'm trying to adopt that philosophy. You know, and just noticing it. Oh, this is a challenge. You know, if you get to that point of even noticing it, it's kind of using the metacognition and taking note that something's happening. You know, and like let's say I'm stuck in a traffic jam. in a traffic jam and I want to get somewhere and it's a drag. I can use that, I can see it as a challenge. It's an opportunity. It's an opportunity for me to, do some optimal breathing. Again, that's what we want the procedural memory to be when we're feeling stressed and challenged. We go into the optimal breathing. We say some thank yous. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Then you're making use of the time. But if the procedural memory is every time a challenge comes, we go into a place of, complaining in our minds. That's another Stoic philosophy, is try to really not complain. Reduce the complaining, but even in your mind. That's the stay in Stoicism. Don't even complain in your mind. Which you need a lot of metacognition to realize that, that you're complaining and that it doesn't have to be that way necessarily. I mean, it might be an old habit. That might be the procedural memory we're stuck in, but that doesn't mean we can't change it, Because that's what this is all about. We're giving our minds a tune-up through working with all this stuff. Cognitive memory. One thing we can do to work with the cognitive memory is one thing is just find more presence, those moments of peace throughout the day. Then we're not perhaps so stuck in our memories. Another thing, as far as trauma goes, a traumatic event can bubble into the conscious mind from the cognitive memory. And if we can meet it, and I did this recently too, so I'm not just theorizing, but there's this traumatic memory that, was really haunting me for a while, whatever. But I met it in my conscious mind when it bubbled up from a place of equanimity and clarity. And this is something I haven't talked about yet, is the superconscious mind for people who are interested in, you could call this the God mind or just God or whatever, but shining its energy down onto us. That's what Thomas Merton, Catholic author and mystic and priest, contemporary guy, or he died in the 70s, I believe. But he said the higher power is always raining down on us. And remember, the conscious mind is the surface of the lake. But if I'm upset, the surface of the lake is choppy. It's like wavy. It's like stormy. If I'm upset, if I'm agitated, anxiety. If I'm depressed, the surface of the lake is kind of muddy, But if I'm in that elevated mind state, I'm feeling clear, balanced, I'm working the breathing in, then the surface of the lake is calm. And then that allows the superconscious to penetrate into the conscious mind and ultimately into the subconscious mind as well. So by working with the conscious mind, we're able to just allow this energy, instead of blocking it, we can block it too. He's like, no, I'm really upset. So I had this traumatic memory come into my conscious mind, and I just met it from a place of equanimity. And I just had some understandings about it. Perhaps it was the superconscious just coming in and enlightening me on this thing. And then I just kind of let it go, So there's a lot of power in working with the conscious and subconscious mind. I want to talk a little bit about this space, too, between the two. Between the conscious and the subconscious, the half awake, half asleep state of consciousness. And I just recently learned, I'm reading a book about this, he's like a Taoist master from Java, kind of a famous guy. In the 80s, some PBS film crew was just traveling through Java, and like just checking out the country and making a TV special about it. Somebody was sick, so they went to an acupuncturist, and they met this guy. They were calling him Dynamo Jack. And the thing is, he would do acupuncture, but he wouldn't even have to use needles. He could just send electricity through his hands. I mean, he would people would be like jerking, their bodies would be jerking, and he'd be like, touch my stomach, and he'd be like, whoa, it'd be like super hot. And I remember seeing this in the 80s, and I was this little black and white TV in my apartment, and I was like, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen on TV, and but another one of his things is he can, start like paper on fire with his hands, supposedly, and it seems legit, but I read a book that my beautiful wife gave me for Christmas this year about this guy who trained with this guy. He was from Greece, and he tracked him down because he saw him on TV, and he trained with him for years. And one of the things Dynamo Jack, or John Chan, I believe his name, was saying is this space between sleep and wake, when you're half asleep, he said that's the place of meditation. That's the place of meditation. I was like, whoa, okay. So that's something to work with. So I'm trying to get to the point of being able to meditate, I guess. But I know what I'm working on now. But it's an interesting aspect of that. Another time you can get to that place of half awake, half asleep is when you're just feeling dizzy. It's like, serious. We have 4 different brain waves. The beta brainwave, where our mind is agitated a little bit. Alpha, focused. Theta is like a meditative. And when you're dreaming, you're in theta. And then there's delta. And that's the slowest brainwave. And that's when you're in the deepest sleep. And that's when little kids grow. Kids grow in their sleep. And I'm thinking it must be during that stage where it's almost like we're just connected with Source, and we don't even realize it, but it's there. Getting back to Hermetics and how God consciousness creates all of nature on the fly, right? And then human consciousness, human collective consciousness, we create all the human-made objects on the fly through our belief in these objects. So the collective human consciousness creates all human-made stuff. God consciousness creates all nature, the planets and the earth. And from that perspective, it's something I ask myself, it's like, what kind of energy am I sending out into the world right now? Because ideally, all of us who are in an elevated mind state, we're sending out elevated vibrations from our consciousness, and they're interweaving with all the other elevated vibrations coming from all these other people around the world, and that's the collective consciousness. You know, also if my mind is in a funky place, you know, then I'm part of that lower mind collective as well. There's a lot of lower consciousness energy out there, you know, and it can be sticky. I can get stuck in that energy if I, you know, start like victim stancing or blaming others or whatever. I can get stuck in this lower collective conscious. But then I try and notice it. I try and use my metacognition, meta-awareness. That's another term. Awareness of your own vibration, awareness of your energy. Noticing it. And then using some skills to transmutate to an elevated state. But one thing I do want to say about consciousness creating something, this is physics. And 100 years ago, they did it's called a double slit experiment. It's been replicated lots of times. But what it essentially strongly indicated was that when a person was watching a photon, was a person with consciousness was, you know, paying attention to a photon, the photon moved like a particle. Okay? Like in a straight line. Moved like a particle. When a human was not watching the photon was moving like a wave. Right? So that's called the observer effect. And that's, in some ways, proof that our consciousness can create change in the outside world, just through its vibration or whatever it is. So that's, and it's taking physics like 100 years to grapple with that one, you know, and they're still working on it. But just for a few minutes, if you all are into it, we could do some power breathing, which for me is the most effective way I know to get into this place of between conscious and subconscious. And it's a very effective way of when we're stuck, or when I'm stuck in the lower mind state, to boost my mind to an elevated state. So, you want to join me? We'll just do this for a few minutes and just follow along. I'll describe to you what's happening. As I'm breathing in, I'm filling my lungs. And I'm exhaling, lengthening my exhale. I'm breathing in through my mouth, and I'm breathing out through my nose. And we're going to do this for a minute, and then we'll do a breath hold. And then we'll do one more set after that. But what I've noticed, as far as psychologically speaking, it's a great way of shutting up the ruminating mind. If I can't get control of my mind, because I can notice it, I can't always control it. That's the thing. But the power breathing is a very effective way for me to actually get a hold of the mind and quiet it down when I want to. So we'll just do a couple rounds of that, because it's a great, from that perspective, a great transmutation skill. I'll be breathing in through my mouth and out through my nose. And we're starting up. One more breath in, breathe in all the way. Exhale a little bit. Hold. Now feel the buzzing in your body. That's your prana. And slowly exhale. Just notice how relaxed you feel. Breathing in, hold. Exhale. Nice job. We'll do one more round. Just keep the breathing graceful and fluid. Should feel kind of good. One more breath, breathe in all the way. Let's exhale a little bit, hold. Feel the buzzing in your body. You want to notice if you're in this mind state, right there. And slowly exhale. Breathing in, hold. Exhale. Now just take note. What does your mind feel like right now? What does your body feel like? It's a practice I try and do pretty much every day. But as I mentioned, just psychologically speaking, it's a potent way at shutting up the ruminating mind. I've discovered for myself. And the more you practice, the better you get at it as well. You can, through practice, you can really achieve some long breath holds, and then really get into that elevated state of mind in a natural way. As Wim Hof puts it, and if you're interested in this stuff, look up Wim Hof on YouTube, but he says just get high on your own supply. You know, that's kind of his motto. Oh, I call it just feeling your prana. Yeah, your energy, your chi. You know, and I've noticed your chi, yeah, like Tai Chi. I mean, that's the thing. In Western medicine, they don't have a word for the energy in our body, but energy really trumps chemistry. Energy is the foundation of everything. Energy is the foundation of this, you know, chair, everything. So it's good to work with our energy, I think. And through power breathing, it's a good way to build energy. And like I said, just from a psychological perspective, it's a great way to quiet the mind down and find clarity and peace. Equanimity, balance. Yeah, I can. Equanimity, I think we achieve equanimity when we're able to get to that point of, you know, the thinking, consciously in our psyche, right? You're thinking, but then you have moments of peace, quiet. And then you think, and then you have another moment of quiet, and you think, and you have another moment of quiet. I think if you're at that stage of consciousness in your psyche, that you have equanimity. Equanimity means you know, the big wind comes and you can like resist it, and boom, and you're solid still. You know, we want to be around people who have equanimity. We don't want to be around people who are like blowing up. And Emerson writes about equanimity and just saying how the most successful business people have a lot of equanimity because people want to be around them. They want to do business with them because you can trust somebody at that point. You know, and the way we can get there is by finding those moments of peace, I believe, because then the mind is just far more clear and balanced. And believe me, every great athlete, every great musician, every great physicist, for that matter, they have that equanimity, they have that peace in their minds, because it allows them to just be present and do what they're doing, you know. I mean, in Einstein, for example, he would think, you know, he would go through these complex, you know, equations in his mind. He would just walk around thinking, but then after that, he would take a break and he'd play the violin. You know, just he'd give his mind that space where it's like, oh, I'm not thinking anymore. I'm just, you know, in that zone. And that's what being in the flow is. I think if we get the right balance of peace and analysis, being in the flow, you're probably quiet, 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 oh, a little bit of thought, quiet, 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 a little bit of thought. But for regular day, equanimity, I think, is just like analysis, thinking, 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 quiet. Thinking, 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 quiet. I should mention, even 2 seconds of quiet is helpful for the mind, because it allows the mind to just relax. It's like, it's like a mini nap. 2 seconds, one breath, one optimal breath. Kind of resets the mind. And I guess that's the way I see equanimity. You know, and just it's really important and very achievable through training and through just, you know, using that metacognition and working with your psyche, your conscious mind, and working on reprogramming these subconscious variables, you know, these components in the subconscious. And remember, when we have equanimity, the surface of the lake is smooth. That allows the supraconscious to penetrate into the conscious mind and into the subconscious, I believe. You know, and so all we need to do really is find that peace, and then we let the supraconscious do the work. That's one way of looking at it. You know, at least I try and do that partly, but I also try and like I said, I say my thank yous, working with the belief garden. I'm trying to develop that procedural memory of every time I'm stressed, taking the optimal breath, you know, maybe saying a few thank yous of that too, and working with my interest library as well. Yeah, well, the superconscious is in each of us, you know, it's within each of us, but to different degrees. Ideally, with Hermetics, what we want to do is create our mind vibration. We want to align our mind vibration with the vibration of, you know, the God mind. If we can harmonize our mind vibration with the God mind, then we have, then we're there. Maybe that's what enlightenment is, you know, or awakening, or, you know, connection with our true power. Because at that point, you know, the superconscious is just connected with us. And according to Hermetics, then you have like superpowers too, and I don't even know what those are, you know, really. But, I mean, the superpowers, let me see here. Thought I wrote something. Well, just things like, I can't find it, but just like being in the right place at the right time. In Hermetics, it talks about if you can harmonize your own mind vibration, you're going to affect all those around you as well. They're all going to feel better. You're going to feel it, like spreads. And I don't know, Hermetics talks about manifesting, which I'm into. I like that idea. I mean, we are creators. We are creators. I mean, we have this spark of the creator within us, right? And, you know, perhaps we are creating all this stuff just with our beliefs. How many people believe in this drum? A lot, you know? Boom, there it is. Whoa. That's cool. Life is not what we think it is, perhaps. there's a lot more to it. But just working with the mind it seems to be, for me, just a worthwhile endeavor. And just having the skills of metacognition and transmutation are valuable, for our psychological well-being and just overall mental health, I would say, mental wellness. And it's fun, I think. You start noticing things. It's like, wow, that was cool. I wonder. But maybe I'll come back in a year when I master this meditation thing. I don't know. Or a couple of years from now, maybe. But, all right. Well, thank you all for coming. Handouts, work with the optimal breathing. It's easy. It's just expanding your ribs underneath your armpits when you're breathing in. You can do that anytime, anywhere. Walking into the store. When I'm walking into a store, I'm trying to do my optimal breathing most of the time. In my mind, it feels better, and my mind feels clearer. And people notice when hopefully they feel a little better too. Because if I walk into a store and if I'm all full of judgment and, that person and that person, and people feel that too. So energy is real, I guess. That's what I'm getting at. And it's beneficial to just work with our energy. And we can do it through our breathing, through our posture. It's something I haven't mentioned, just standing with the heart forward a bit, having the head up. That affects your state of consciousness. Deepening the breath, saying a few thank yous. All these simple things, but if we can actually practice, they have profound and positive effects on our consciousness and our lives. So thanks again.
To become more involved in the Heart Mind Center, join our community and explore our membership options.
Also, check out our podcast, Mindflow Radio.
Mindflow Radio.